Central State Hospital in Milledgeville, Georgia, stands as a testament to the evolving landscape of mental health care in the United States. From its inception in the 19th century to its role in the modern era, this facility has witnessed a remarkable transformation in the treatment of mental illness. This comprehensive narrative offers a detailed overview of the hospital's history, tracing its evolution from an institution as family to its role in contemporary society. Institution as Familida, Cooper, a visionary physician, introduced the radical concept of the institution as family during Central State Hospital's early years. He believed that patients could receive the best care from an extended family of strangers, away from the potential misunderstandings and emotional attachments that home environments might entail. Patients were encouraged to engage in productive activities like gardening, farming, or working in workshops to cultivate a sense of usefulness. Dr. Thomas A. Green, another prominent Milledgeville physician, took over as asylum superintendent in 1845 and expanded upon the institution's family model. Dr. Green welcomed new patients, many of whom arrived in deplorable conditions, and immediately released them from shackles, granting them newfound freedom within the institution. He abolished unnecessary physical restraints and maintained an open-door policy, earning a reputation for never turning people away, even during overcrowding. Milledgeville and the Civil War funding the Milledgeville Asylum was an ongoing challenge, as it initially relied on paid admissions to sustain itself. However, with the Civil War devastating Georgia's cotton economy, families could no longer afford treatment for their loved ones. Dr. Green sought increased state funding to complete the hospital, construct a library and chapel, and acquire additional land. Despite these efforts, the hospital's financial fate became increasingly entangled with political pressures and economic turmoil. Union General William T. Sherman's march through Georgia further exacerbated the hospital's dire financial situation. While spared from destruction, the hospital received minimal support from the defeated state, pushing Dr. Green to admit refugees from other southern states where hospitals were under Union control. The hospital staff, primarily consisting of older and infirm individuals, due to able-bodied staff joining the war effort, struggled to provide adequate care. Dr. Green even resorted to scavenging for food and money in the countryside. The aftermath of the Civil War also brought challenges related to the increasing black patient population, necessitating separate accommodations as mandated by law. In 1866, the first colored-only building was constructed on campus, marking the beginning of a second campus. An overcrowded asylum by 1872, Central State Hospital had admitted 448 patients, leading Dr. Green to admit only nonviolent patients and house multiple patients in small, 10 to 12 foot rooms. He believed that the earlier patients received treatment within 1 year or less, the more successful their recovery would be. Despite these efforts, the hospital faced an ever-growing influx of new patients. In 1874, Dr. Theophilus Powell assumed the role of superintendent and grappled with the pressing issue of overcrowding. The hospital had become a repository not just for the mentally ill, but also for individuals deemed undesirable by their communities, such as alcoholics, criminals, and the elderly. Other patients simply had nowhere else to turn. To manage this chaos, a law was passed allowing the release of incurable but harmless patients, creating space for those who could be treated. Dr. Powell also introduced exercise and amusement programs for patients and oversaw the construction of a new hospital building and an on-site railroad station to accommodate a surge in patient applications. Abuse, neglect, and racial tension at the turn of the 20th century. Overcrowding had become a major issue at Central State Hospital, renamed the Georgia State Sanitarium. By 1910, The hospital's 3,347 patients were cared for by 12 doctors, and decreased care became inevitable. Reports of abuse, neglect, unsanitary facilities, and seclusion rooms began to surface. Many patients classified as unclassified fell through the cracks, leading to stories of loved ones vanishing within the asylum's labyrinthine corridors. In 1921, the segregation of black patients ended, but racial tension persisted in the broader community. In 1925, a nurse named Amy Oxford was tragically murdered by a black patient, leading to local townspeople storming the hospital and killing the assailant in the same brutal manner. Hospital staff continued to view farm work as a beneficial activity for patients. The hospital's 800-acre farmland provided for its food needs. And while the program didn't offer comprehensive treatment, it imparted valuable job skills to patients. Desperate times, desperate measures. In 1929, the institution was renamed Milledgeville State Hospital, reflecting evolving societal attitudes toward mental illness and its treatment. By this time, the hospital had expanded significantly, accommodating 6,000 patients with a waiting list of 1,500. Deteriorating buildings had become fire hazards, prompting the acquisition of an additional 132 acres of land, and the construction of new, modern hospital buildings and a tuberculosis ward. By the 1940s, Milledgeville State Hospital had over 10,000 patients, each averaging a 20-year residency. Attendants and nurses worked grueling 60 to 70-hour weeks, with nurses earning approximately $74 per month. Thousands of patients could have been discharged as harmless, but poor state financing and the drain of able-bodied staff during World War II necessitated radical measures to manage the patient influx. Shock treatments and lobotomies addressed the untenable conditions. More radical treatments such as insulin shock and electroshock therapy became common. Electroshocks were administered en masse at the discretion of hospital staff, often leaving patients confused about whether they were undergoing treatment or punishment. While electroshock therapy brought temporary order to the hospital, it also resulted in memory loss for many patients, sometimes permanent, effectively erasing memories of abuse. In 1951, lobotomies were introduced for especially chronic cases, with 125 severely ill patients undergoing the procedure, only 24 of whom were able to return home. The outcome for others was often worse. Throughout the mid-20th century, Atlanta newspapers frequently reported instances of patient abuse, deteriorating hospital conditions, and overcrowding. State politics significantly influenced hospital policies, with board appointments linked to political favors and a drive to maintain high patient levels for economic profit. Thousands of unmarked graves. Central State Hospital and its predecessor institutions are home to an extensive and haunting burial ground. Unmarked graves, estimated to number around 30,000, dot the hospital's landscape. Patients, once marginalized and stigmatized, found their final resting places in these graves. In 1938, an African-American cemetery was excavated to make room for new construction. The caskets had long disintegrated, and the remains were placed in small boxes and reinterred more closely, marked only by simple metal poles with identification numbers. This practice of using numbered markers was common across the hospital grounds, obscuring the identities of those interred. Over the years, many markers were lost, discarded, or forgotten in the underbrush. In some cases, prison inmates tasked with groundskeeping duties tossed these markers into the woods without recording their locations. Consequently, Central State Hospital Cemetery, also known as Cedar Lane Cemetery, became one vast, unmarked plot. Society's changing views toward the end of the 20th century Patient numbers at Central State Hospital dwindled as advancements in medication, home treatment, and decreased stigma toward mental illness transform mental health care. By the time of this writing, only 165 seriously ill patients remain at the hospital, committed by court order. The question of what to do with the sprawling 2,000-acre campus rose. The Central State Hospital Local Redevelopment Authority CSHLRA, tasked with finding economic development opportunities, rebranded the hospital grounds as Renaissance Park in an effort to attract investment. While some businesses have repurposed parts of the campus, challenges persist in finding new partners, particularly for the larger, deteriorating buildings that draw the interest of curious onlookers. Can you tour Central State Hospital? The Milledgeville Visitors Center now offers daily trolley tours of the campus grounds, including Cedar Lane Cemetery and the Chapel of All Faiths. These tours provide insights into the hospital's complex history and the challenges faced by its patients and staff. The campus also hosts various outdoor events throughout the year, including bike races, music and food festivals, and staff reunions in the Pecan Grove. The Me Film Festival even hosts a horror movie night on the grounds near the Chapel of All Faiths. However, access to many of the historic hospital buildings is strictly prohibited due to their hazardous condition. Decades of neglect have rendered these structures unsafe to enter. Conclusion: Central State Hospital's journey through history mirrors the evolution of mental health care in the United States. From its early days as an institution as family to its role in contemporary society, it serves as a complex and often painful reminder of society's changing attitudes toward mental illness. While the hospital's past is marked by abuse, neglect, and overcrowding, it also reveals the tireless efforts of staff seeking to provide solace and treatment to individuals grappling with mental afflictions that remain enigmatic to this day. Central State Hospital stands as a silent monument to the enduring challenges and progress in the field of mental health care.